And actually, there's a show called Nobody Wants This. It's like with the Adam Brody who plays like the quote hot rabbi, and then there's Kristen Bell who plays this podcaster. And there's a scene in that show where the sister, gets really nervous talking to execs, but Kristen Bell and Adam Brody are on a weekend away, so the sister has to handle this like meeting with like Spotify execs. And she talks to this other character, and the character's like, just hold on to the last three words of some whatever someone says, and then repeat those back. And I guarantee you, conversation will flow. And then she uses this, and it works. But if I were speaking to uh, someone that I maybe have trouble speaking to, let's say it's one of the first times I'm speaking to one of my parents' friends, right? And they have like a very intimidating role, or they're intimidating in some way. Maybe it's how they carry themselves, or maybe it's just the contrast and chemistry of who they are and who I am. In order to break ground with them and try and find something, I would reflect back. So they're talking about, yada, yada, yada. And then their son is in jujitsu and he's actually going to Thailand to go to this training camp that's super intense. Wow, a training camp in Thailand. That sounds really intense. Welcome to Side Note, the podcast, where we empower ambitious women with new perspectives. I'm Samantha Fackler, your host. Join me for off-the-cuff conversations with the most authentic people I can find. Entrepreneurs, creatives, authors, visionaries. We welcome you as you are and hope you leave with what you need. This is Side Note, the podcast where big ideas become real. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Side Note. I am your host, Samantha Fackler. I'm a business coach for women, and today we have a solo episode about how to speak confidently. I am so excited. We're going to go over a lot of actionable tactics on how to speak more clearly and confidently in many different situations, because I don't know about you, but there are so many different rooms that we end up in our life where we find that we almost can't breathe and we don't feel confident enough to speak our thoughts or our opinions when that room probably needs it. Now, I am obsessed with words, so there are going to be lots of quotes and examples throughout this episode because I find that the power of words is one of the most fascinating things I think our world has. Words allow us to communicate, and so our word choice and the way that we deliver those words can have a massive impact on the world. And if you're a leader of any type, if you have a business, then your words are so important. And the way you speak them are arguably more important. For me, there are a lot of different areas where this comes up. So historically, when I was a kid, I was very socially anxious. And it's very strange because I was like the most confident kid in the world until first, second grade. And then something switched. And I don't know exactly what that switch was. But all of a sudden, I went from like total freedom, saying whatever, like exactly how you'd think about a toddler, to very, very quiet, almost selectively mute in certain rooms and classrooms. And so between, second grade and eighth grade, I was super quiet and I was socially awkward and nervous. And of course, that's a part of childhood and getting to know ourselves. But speaking and communication is something that is very near and dear to my heart. And I had to find my voice in high school, and I started to really feel more comfortable speaking and being myself and letting myself be seen. But as an entrepreneur, I find this to be even more important and even more grave because you are leading something in the world. You're bringing something, you're creating change. Obviously, you're passionate about something. And when we are passionate about something, that needs to be communicated. So let's get into it. So first, I want you to think about some different areas where you may not feel super confident speaking, or you find that you have a block. So for some people, this is public speaking. For some people, this is when they find themselves meeting someone who's just like super hot, and then you like lose your ability to speak or breathe. For some people, this might be meeting certain people who are maybe really charismatic. And then if you don't feel charismatic, all of a sudden you feel even less so because of the contrast. It might be when you're in your room with your boss or your team or meeting your future in-laws. Our lives are rich with experiences. And so I guarantee you, you have some where speaking all of a sudden feels difficult. So let's laser in on those moments. This is what this episode is for, so that the next time you find yourself in a room or in a group that feels a little like, I don't know what to say, you have some tools in your back pocket. Now, I want you to think about someone who is a very confident speaker. And this could be someone in history, this could be someone that you know personally, but just take a moment to think about why. Why did they jump out in your mind as a confident speaker? Was it their tone, their word choice, the way they held their body, the way that they found words really easily, the way they asked questions or paid attention to you, or the way they made you feel? All of these things are very important to remember because they feed into all the lessons that are here today in this episode. So, one of the first stories I like to tell around speaking is this Greek guy, Demosthenes. And I'm just going to call him Demo Guy for short because that's a really long Greek name to say. Now, he is famous in history as an orator, but like all good stories, he started as a terrible speaker. And he actually had several instances where he would be speaking and laughed at, and people would interrupt him, and he couldn't get his point across. So he had a little like punk Britney Spears moment where he was like, fuck the world. I'm going to go like hide away because he had a lot of shame and he wanted to figure out how to speak. So he shaved half his head and he literally locked himself in like a subterranean vault, so to speak, like a basement, and was like, I'm going to practice this every day. And there are different stories. I think it's at least 3 months, but every day he would practice speaking. Every day he would go in and practice different things with tone, different things about the messages he wanted to share with society at the time. And he emerged from that as one of the most famous speakers in Greek history. What does this story communicate? The power of practice. Practice, practice, practice. I believe anyone can be a confident, clear speaker. It just takes a little practice. Even if you have a speech impediment, you can work on this, right? The King's Speech, if anyone remembers that movie, King, he has a speech impediment. He works on it. He works on all the things that kind of emotionally and spiritually fed into that impediment, and then delivers this incredible speech at the end that, like, is so inspiring. So practice, and everything we cover today, you can practice. You can practice it on your own. And I also encourage you to practice it in what I call low stakes situations. This is, if you have a partner at home or roommates, practice it with people you love without, you don't need to tell them you're practicing it, but practice these little tools. You can also practice them out in the wild. I remember I would practice some of this stuff at the grocery store when I was checking out. So yeah, practice, practice. Another thing here, and something I have learned through this podcast, is expression of energy while speaking. There are a lot of moments where we can catch ourselves or listen to something back and we find ourselves monotone. Like we are one tone, one level of voice, and we just talk and talk and talk and talk. And of course, people lose us when that happens. Now, I had an experience where I came face to face with this. I was living in New York at the time, and I was leading a webinar for hundreds of people that were clients and leads, basically. And it was the first time I had done something like this. And I remember I practiced and I gave this speech to this or presentation to the CEO and the head of the product team, who actually had a background in acting and was a great leader. although he intimidated me a lot. And, anyways, fast forward to this webinar. I'm in this little sound booth and I'm giving this presentation, and I can see that it's, being broadcasted to like 2,000 people. And at the end, I feel like, okay, I did a good job. I practiced, I like did all the things I could do. And then I listened back and it was so miserable to listen to, not just because it's difficult to hear your own voice, but I realized how monotone it was. And the head of product, being in New York, was not shy about feedback. He did not say good job. He said, we need to work on your expression of energy. And that's when he was like, I have a background in acting, and it's actually very important to express energy when you're speaking to a group of people. Now, here's where this line is delicate. You're not acting when you're public speaking. You're not acting when you're speaking to people in general. But actors do know how to channel an authentic emotion into their words so that people on the other side feel that. And that's the point. So when you're speaking about something, think about, what are the emotions? Why are you speaking about this stuff? What is the point? And then allow that to come through authentically. And now this takes practice. I myself have been practicing it. When I started to show up on Instagram, I saw this too, this like monotone delivery. And then I realized I just need to be more myself. I just need to let myself be seen and show on the outside like I feel on the inside. And that's really difficult depending on, your makeup and personality and all sorts of things that go into it. So, expression of energy, but from an authentic place, is a huge key to speaking confidently. I love this little anecdote too. How do you know who is a king or a queen? Think about movies you've watched where it's showing a king or a queen, or maybe you've read a book and there's a scene. They are the most still people in the room. Now, what is important about that? Usually in these scenes, there's a lot of people buzzing around back and forth, maybe communicating, maybe not, but the king or queen are still. You also notice in certain cultures when a group walks in, sometimes the leader is actually at the back. They're the last one to walk in. And it's this essence of being really calm, cool, and collected. They are the most still, and they have the most breath, which is what this next tip comes in as. It's the breath. Breath is key to speaking confidently. And anyone who is a musician or singer knows that breath is so key to how we vocally express, how we actually speak. Now, this is very near and dear to my heart too, because I am a soft-spoken person naturally, and I've had to train my voice to become more confident and louder in certain rooms. And now this is where I'm going to bring in the concept of the throat chakra, because this has been a huge learning journey for me. I do view myself as a confident public speaker. When it comes to speeches or presentations, I feel very comfortable giving, orating in those circumstances. It's when I find myself in front of a group of people and don't know what I'm speaking on, or are thrown up with nothing, no material, or like even at my wedding, being in the spotlight was sometimes a little like, ooh, ooh, ah. Or sometimes if I find myself in a large group at a dinner table that's loud, my voice will actually disappear. It will become so low and so soft spoken, it's really difficult to hear what I'm saying. And I know this because I can feel it in my throat. I feel my voice get caught up high, right? Almost like underneath my jaw versus in my chest or in my belly. And I notice people leaning in to hear me. And that's when I realized I have some shit with my throat and voice I need to work out. So the throat chakra is an energy center, and it's one that fluctuates based on how we're feeling. So this is where that feeling of calm, collected stillness can actually allow us to expand this energy center. It gives us greater access to our voice. And you can feel how when I slow down, my voice becomes more resonant. Hear that word, resonant. And I want you to hang on to that. And notice where in your life does your voice come out most resonant? Because it is in those circumstances that give you clues to what you need to feed this energy center of the body so that you can connect with this voice on a deep level. All right, some other ways to focus on this piece of the actual throat and breath, the diaphragm. So, many people say the diaphragm is actually your key to confidence. And your diaphragm is located kind of below like your bra strap area, around where your rib cage might poke out at the bottom. And when you breathe, when your lungs expand, the diaphragm area drops. It gets more air, right? It gets more space. So that's why people say belly breathing is really good for you, because you're getting more space, more air in the lungs by breathing into your belly and pushing that diaphragm out. Now, if you were to put your hand or maybe even a thumb pointing towards you around this area, so in your center, usually like a hand above the belly button, but again, that like just below the bra strap area, try for a moment breathing out and pushing out the belly. Inflating the belly like a balloon, and then exhale. You should feel that thumb or that hand go in and out. That's your diaphragm. This is your key to confidence, because when you take a moment and remember to breathe in here low and slow, keywords low and slow, you are able to calm your nervous system down. And this is going to help you in those moments where it's difficult to speak. All you need to remember is breathe. When you breathe, you relax the body, you relax the throat, you gain access to that lower, more resonant voice. There is a TED Talk from Caroline Goiter that said, and she says, all thought is breath. And this is the third key point here, that respiration and inspiration have the same root. So when you're speaking and you don't know what thought might come next or what you want to say, or you feel like you're frozen, breathing, that respiration, is what allows us to connect to inspiration. And inspiration is the start of that thought that comes in, that we literally inhale and then can speak. So if you feel caught, if you feel stuck, if you feel frozen when you're speaking or in front of someone, take a breath and then allow that breath to bring in the next thought. Now, to really be confident in speaking, there's another element here that is going to be counterintuitive, but it's also going to help you in these frozen moments. And that is to shut your mouth. Because when you think about breathing, if you shut your mouth and breathe in through the nose, you can actually feel the air coming in your nose. And then that feeling, that tuning into that sensation around your nose, is actually very calming for the mind. It gives your mind something to latch onto, like an anchor. And then you can exhale. But to breathe deeply through the nose, you need to shut your mouth. And this becomes really important in speaking, because if you notice with these people that speak really confidently, or you look at their speeches, they use the power of the pause. All communication courses or books or resources I have ever consumed all talk about the power of the pause. Pausing gives us a moment to think about what we intentionally want to say. Pausing ourselves can stop a long-winded run-off sentence or paragraph that people get lost on. Pausing allows us to reconnect with our breath, with ourselves, and that thought that comes through the breath. So, next time you feel frozen, pause, breathe, close your mouth while you breathe, take a breath, exhale, and then tune into that sensation of feeling calmer. Tune into that belly breath if you can. And then I promise you, the words that you find next will be more resonant than the words before that pause. So here's a great example of when we are intentionally choosing our words and communicating. If you go back in history, there are countless people and examples I could pull for this. But one that I found to be very inspirational to me was way back in Teddy Roosevelt's era. And he was speaking about the Grand Canyon because there was a lot of pressure to put hotels there and create business around it. And then he gave this quote: "Leave as is. You cannot improve upon it. The ages have been at work on it, and man can only mar it." Think about that. He's not using some fancy ass vocabulary. He's saying it straight and to the point, but it is also beautiful. And the way that he speaks and the words that he chose in this quote allows you to visualize exactly the magic of the Grand Canyon. And now I'm sure you're thinking about images or videos you've seen of how beautiful and impressive and magnificent this place is. And that quote then gave way and gave movement to national parks across the US, which are still here today. And it's just an example of, when we believe something, when we have passion around something, and we put words to it confidently, calmly, the impact from that can be long lasting. The impact from that can be a legacy. So, three things go into communication. One, words. As you see with this Teddy Roosevelt example, words are important. We have better access to words that make the most impact when we are calm, cool, collected. Second is tone. As you saw from the actor webinar moment, which I never want to say the word webinar ever again, tone makes a big difference. It is what allows us to express the emotion behind the thought. It allows us to connect with other people. The third is body language, and this is huge. Body language communicates so much more than our words. And when studying communication, this is huge in terms of actually getting our point across and connecting with people. Now, think about, if you have a pet or someone has a pet, you obviously don't speak the same language as that dog or cat or chinchilla, whatever kind of strange pet besides a dog or a cat or a bird. Those pets pick up on body language. That's why when we tell a dog to sit or stay and we use a hand motion, that dog associates that hand motion with what we're trying to command. Same goes for public speaking. The way we hold our body tells our brain more about our surroundings. So if we're feeling unsafe, our shoulders tend to come in, we tend to retreat. If we tell our body it's safe, our shoulders can relax down and back, our head tends to be held higher. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can actually physically see me do these different motions. So for a moment, I want you to practice this. First, cave your shoulders in, kind of like you're scrolling or doom scrolling in your lap, and feel what that energy is like in your body. It's a little bit stuck. It's kind of like we're in a C shape curving forward. And now go back. Stack your spine tall. Let your shoulders fall down and back. Lift your head high so that your chin is parallel to the ground. Now feel what energy is like in the body now. You probably have more access to energy in this position. And there are actually meditation practices that require you to have a straight spine because, coming back to those chakras and energy centers, you have more flow of energy when you're sitting tall. I know a lot of people these days are like, "Ugh, whatever, we're all going to have bad posture because we're all on screens." I want to challenge that. That doesn't need to be the norm. And in fact, you are going to feel much more confident if you practice standing tall, sitting tall. And there are a lot of different ways to try and do this. It doesn't have to be something that a $200 device that you wear on your shirt that reminds you to sit tall. I just don't really think that's a long-term Solution, if it works for you, great. But for me, no. But I have heard of this trick called the doorway trick. And it's if you remind yourself every time that you walk through a doorway to stand tall and correct your posture, then suddenly, whenever you think of a doorway in your mind, your body will automatically do it. It's almost like training yourself like you would train a dog. And if that triggered you, sorry. But in order to remind yourself about the doorway thing, you can post a little post-it note at eye level so that every time you walk through a doorway, you stand a little taller. And then what you'll start to do is that anytime you walk through a doorway, you go into a conference room, you go into a meeting, you go into a room with your future in-laws, you attend a date and walk into a restaurant or bar, you will automatically stand taller. And I actually had a date once where I did this, and this is a long time ago. And he said that he was intimidated by the way I held myself because it was very confident. So this goes a long way. People notice this. It's not just about our energy, it's also how people receive our body language. So if you're giving a pitch, if you're getting funding, if there is a high stakes situation, stand tall and do what you need to do to remind yourself to do that. Now, if you are someone who tends to get wordy and talk, and just kind of run off, and all of a sudden you're talking about pastures and raw milk when you started your conversation talking about business with a team member, this is for you. This is a framework I actually worked with a client on this week, and it's called the PrEP framework. So if you're giving a presentation and you're someone who tends to wind up in long-winded situations, PREP. The first P stands for point. And this is just what's the number one thing you want to get across in this presentation or in this conversation. That is your anchor to talk about. R in this PrEP framework is reason. So what's the supporting evidence for that? E is example, and this is the evidence piece. So data or information that's anecdotal that supports the main point. If you've ever written an essay, I'm sure you remember this. It's like concrete evidence and then commentary. So we're kind of looping in those same concepts to the PrEP framework of speaking. The last P is point again, and this is a very key lesson. You will notice with confident speakers that they will reflect or rephrase in order to communicate. I give my point. I give some reasoning behind that point. I maybe include some examples that illustrate that. And then I rephrase my point at the end. As humans, we respond to repetition. Yes, it is a form of training, but it's also a form of education and learning and retention. To retain concepts, we often have to repeat them. So if you want to get something across, repeat it, but in a rephrased way. It doesn't need to be verbatim, just rephrase it. This also is relevant to this thing called reflection. When I did my coaching training, reflection is one of the first things you hear about. Same with communication training, which I heard about before I did my coaching training. Reflection is when someone says something and you reflect back to them. And it's a form of helping someone feel really heard. And actually, there's a show called Nobody Wants This. It's like with the Adam Brody, who plays like the quote hot rabbi. And then there's Kristen Bell, who plays this podcaster. And there's a scene in that show where the sister, gets really nervous talking to execs, but Kristen Bell and Adam Brody are on a weekend away. So the sister has to handle this meeting with Spotify execs. And she talks to this other character, and the character's like, just hold on to the last three words of whatever someone says, and then repeat those back. And I guarantee you conversation will flow. And then she uses this and it works. So go look up that scene. It's really helpful for illustrating what this reflection looks like. But if I were speaking to someone that I maybe have trouble speaking to, let's say it's one of the first times I'm speaking to one of my parents' friends, right? And they have like a very intimidating role, or they're intimidating in some way. Maybe it's how how they carry themselves, or maybe it's just the contrast and chemistry of who they are and who I am, in order to break ground with them and try and find something, I would reflect back. So maybe they're talking about, yada, yada, yada. And then their son is in jujitsu and he's actually going to Thailand to go to this training camp that's super intense. Wow, a training camp in Thailand. That sounds really intense. Yeah, da 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 da. And then they go on and on and on about more details. That's my way of reflecting to them, helping them feel heard, creating a connection, and also digging deeper into a specific concept. Now, as a coach, I use this because I will notice certain things when someone is speaking to me, and I will have an intuition about which things we should dive into or what in someone's description of something actually holds the key to clarity that they're looking for, but they don't see it. So you can see how this tool is used just in general conversation, but also when we are having very intentional conversation that is geared towards something. Now, lastly, here to wrap up this episode, I want to give this other example of a beautiful figure we all know, Princess Diana. She was terrified of public speaking. Sweet, sweet Princess Di. And she had this speaking coach, and she went to him and she was like, I don't speak like Charles. I can't just riff and have these jokes that come out and, go on with them. I don't speak that way. I'm softer and I don't have a lot of jokes, And this coach said, share your heart. And I know this sounds like a Disney movie quote, but it's not, because that connection is the most important thing. If you're giving a speech or presentation, it's not about the speech. It's not about the materials you put together, the slide deck you put together, or the list of research data points you have to back up your point. It is about the visceral connection between you and the people you're speaking to. It's like this Emerson quote. It's one of my favorites. And I actually had a mentor say it to me once, that is, what you do speaks so loudly, I cannot hear your words. And what it means is that it's how you speak. It's showing those emotions, allowing them to come through, being authentic, being vulnerable, just sharing your heart no matter what words come out around it. That is going to be what people remember. And so if you don't feel confident with speaking because you feel like maybe you don't have access to as many words as the public speaker, motivational speaker you're comparing yourself with, pause the comparison and just connect back with, what are you trying to communicate? What is the feeling underneath? What's the heart is feeling, it's emotions. It's when you look at the heart chakra of things, that is how we connect to other people. And that's the core of relationships. So find that connection and share whatever it is you're sharing from there, and just practice that. People will receive it. They will hear it. And sometimes I do this a lot too. I will use lots of different words, or potentially the wrong tense or the wrong, sometimes things will come out in with incorrect grammar. I'm doing it right now. But you still get my point, because I am showing up authentically. I'm talking about something that I'm super passionate about, something that I've seen change my life and open up doors for me that I never thought would open up. And I've seen this for so many people. My client this week that I worked on this specifically with shared, 3 months ago, she was terrified to speak in this room of leaders that she was working with. And she felt really small and she felt insecure. And now she is showing up as if, they are her peers, and she feels more confident, and she's standing taller, and she's talking louder, and she's feeling more confident and pushing back. And she's starting to see how the room communicates and what her role is in that room. But most importantly, she's sharing what she really believes now, which is exactly what that room needs more of. So again, a reminder, and coming back to our first point here, communication is all about sharing what we believe and knowing that that is important, because when you do that, you create impact. Now, a little review here. You can fast forward to this if you have not listened to any of the episode. 1, practice like Demosthenes or the demo Greek guy that we talked about. Practice in low stakes situations. If you're at the grocery store, they say, cool, this is your total, blah, blah, blah. Thanks for coming. Pause, breathe. Thank you. Work on your tone. Instead of thank you, thank you. It's more authoritative, it's more confident. If you mess up, like I just had that flub when I was speaking, keep going. It's all about practice. 2, breathe. 3, pause. Understand the beauty of the pause and what can come in there. Remember, inspiration and respiration are connected. They have the same root. Communicate from the heart, feel that connection. And if you're feeling lost or feel like you can't find that connection, come back to a prep framework. What's the number one thing you're trying to get across? What's the reasoning for that? Any examples you have to illustrate it? And then rephrasing, repetition, reflection. And the 3 most important things when we're communicating, words we use. Words we use are 1, tone is 2, body language is 3, stand tall, sit tall. It makes a huge difference for you and for the people around you. With that, I hope this gave you some material so that you feel more confidently speaking in public, in private, in any situation. I actually have a few guests coming on the show to elaborate on this topic and talk more about communication. If you have any questions or anything that you want to see more of, please send a message. You can find more information at sidenotepod.com or growwithsam.com, and you can contact us on both. You can also find me on Instagram at growwith_Sam or on TikTok at sidenotepod. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for listening. Catch you next time.